Thank you very much for including me again in the CCG ongoing dialogues, and it's very nice and honor for me to be on a panel with so many distinguished folks in the US, China, and Chinese trade field. I'll come back to being in a similarly, I hope, pragmatic optimist position to Wendy, but I'll start on the inflation front. China's entry into active world trade, not just formally into the WTO, coincided with, but I don't think actually caused a general low inflation in the world. That is evident by the fact that we are talking about at Peterson, my colleagues Gary Huffbauer, Megan Hogan, and Huiyao Wang have done the work about how changing tariffs on China would make a material difference to inflation, but would only affect a small portion of the total inflation we see now. Inflation remains primarily a short-term macroeconomic outcome. And the reason I want to emphasize that is twofold. First, we have made the case, and our board vice chair, Larry Summers, has encouraged and utilized our work to further make the case that it should be what we would call a no-brainer for the Biden administration to lift the tariffs on Chinese goods in US's own self-interest on inflation as well as in general. The fact that they have not, and as Wendy and others have described, there's a dispute over this, shows you just how strong the anti-China and anti-trade feelings are in the US Congress. And that's a sad reality. I think we're forcing them to show their true colors to some degree by having this out there, these studies of what difference it would make and how little the tariffs have accomplished. But I think we all have to recognize what this shows. The second reason I want to emphasize that trade with China and China's role in the world economy is not the main driver of inflation or deflation is because it says, again, that we can try to walk and chew gum at the same time. We can try to separate those issues where China and the US together, or the multilateral system, or the G20, can make progress from those issues where it seems hard to do so. But we should still try to make progress on that. And so turning that around, picking up on what several of the panels speaking before me have said about the relative to expectation success of the WTO ministerial that just completed, I think, as others have said, it is potentially a positive model to see China and the US not getting in the way of each other, perhaps starting out with conflicting positions, and ultimately on the TRIPS waiver and on other things, essentially saying de jure, China doesn't rescind its developing country status, but de facto it does for things that involve real developing countries. And so in that sense, I want to go back to something, Henry, that you and I spoke about, I think, the last time I was on a CCG panel, which is, I think right now there's not that much good to be done in the bilateral US-China relationship, but it would be, I think, good for world peace, good for things like vaccines and disease control, good against hunger, and good for longer term development if the US and China could agree on some rules of the road for how they treat the rest of the world. And in particular, that we do not go down a bidding war with other countries, be it Argentina or Chad or Vietnam, that there's healthy competition among businesses and private investment, but that we do not see ourselves as forcing other economies to choose one side or the other. And I think there are practical steps we can take together to reduce that risk. So that, building on the kind of pragmatic optimism, limited, but I think real, that came out of the ministerial, and how much better that did than, say, the G20 meeting around the IMF spring meetings when there could not be even a communique, shows that if we get away from the Russia-China linkages and the direct US-China disputes, we may be able to do constructive things on climate change and global health and development. Thank you.